All right, Crim 11, let us knock out Chapter 5 here, Social Interactionist Theories of Delinquency. So this chapter talks a lot, spit it out, Fernandez. Okay, it talks a lot about a lot of the things that we discussed, at least to a certain extent in Chapter 4. So we're still talking about society and society's role in possibly causing or being linked with causes for delinquent behavior. So let's just jump into it. I'm skipping that. But one of the most important concepts out of this chapter that I really want you to understand is the labeling theory. We are going to pretend, I'm going to pick out a student in this class. I know Joseph Esparza is in this class. So Joseph Esparza has enrolled in my class. And sorry, Joseph, I just needed to use somebody as my guinea pig for this. But Joseph, and this is not true, by the way, but Joseph has an older brother named John Espinoza, okay? I had John in my class, and John was a complete nightmare. He showed up late. He didn't do his work. He was disrespectful. He was rude to other students. And overall, he was a nightmare to have in class. Okay? This is not true, by the way, guys. Not true. Sorry, I hope that you don't really have a brother named John. So, I get rid of John. John finally moves on, drops my class, whatever. And then, the next semester, who do I get but Joseph Esparza? And Joseph tells me, hey, Fernandez, I think you know my brother, John. And I immediately look at him, and what goes through my brain? What do you think? Right? I think, you think that I'm going to think that Joseph is just like his brother. And I'm automatically going to treat him differently because of some biases or a label that I have put on him because of his brother. He has nothing to do with his brother, but in my mind, the two of them are linked. And I have a bias now against Joseph because of things that his brother did. I treat him differently. He behaves differently. If I treat you like crap in my class, are you going to be nice or are you going to act out? Yeah, it makes sense that if I'm not good to you, you're not going to be good to me or anybody else. So I've labeled him and I've caused him to act out negatively because of the label that I put on him. Think kindergarten teachers, or, from kindergarten to first grade. Do you think that the kindergarten teachers and the first grade teachers talk over the summer about the children that were in their class that they couldn't stand? Should they? No. Do they? Probably. Those kids almost never have a chance because they are labeled. Now think if you have a bias against a certain race, ethnicity, gender, whatever it is, that label we, society, put on people can cause them to act out. I hope this is making sense. Most of our lives, the vast majority of our lives, involves interacting with others socially. Unless there's a worldwide pandemic, at which time you're probably only interacting with your family. But anyways, you get what I mean. Generally speaking, we are interacting with people all day, every day. How we interact and how people see us and treat us can definitely have an impact on the way we act in return. So here's another kind of example of a labeling theory, a little bit different, but imagine you live in Ohio and you have cancer. And while you are living in Ohio with cancer, you start struggling with the side effects of chemo. And you are researching, looking up ways to relieve those symptoms. And you decide that marijuana, THC, is... Okay, I had to pause there for a second, so now I got to remember where I was. You have cancer, you live in Ohio, and you want to use marijuana to soothe your side effect symptoms from chemo, but it's illegal. Marijuana is illegal in Ohio. So you decide to go to Colorado and pick up some marijuana in order to, and again, only for health purposes. You're not trying to go smoke, get high. You just want to be able to eat. You go back to Ohio and you get arrested in Ohio for being in possession of marijuana. Is it reasonable for you to be labeled as a deviant or a delinquent? If you were in Colorado, it would be no big deal. But if you're in Ohio, suddenly, you're the criminal of the neighborhood because you went and got some marijuana to treat your chemo side effects. Does that put a deviant label on you? And a lot of people would argue, yeah, it does. Could that change the way I behave? If people saw me as a criminal, do you think it's more likely that I would act like a criminal? Anyways, that's kind of this whole labeling theory thing. I'm going to kind of skip through some of this stuff. Blah, blah, blah. This is the whole process of becoming deviant by way of the labeling theory. I'm going to kind of skip through that. Think about your days in elementary school, junior high, high school. You probably knew someone that ended up in juvie, as we used to say back then, in juvenile hall. When they came back to school, did you view them differently? Did they have a different reputation? And were they treated differently because of that? And did they feel like they were less of a person because they knew that they were being seen as a deviant? Anyways, just kind of questions I'm throwing out there. Radical non-intervention. This is a really becoming more common now, but ultimately the concept of radical non-intervention is that police and the criminal justice system kind of just take a hands-off approach when dealing with juveniles. And they do this because a lot of times young people make stupid mistakes. Well, so do old people, by the way. But anyways, young people make stupid mistakes. And I'm going to go out on a limb, and I hope this didn't just pop up remind me tomorrow. Okay. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that maybe even you did something dumb when you were young, as I'm sure I did as well. Imagine how your life would be today if the police had caught you and you had a juvenile record, a criminal record. Would your life be different right now? And most kids, not all, of course, but most kids are going to grow out of that stuff. So the concept of radical non-intervention is leave kids alone whenever possible. Don't drag them into the criminal justice system because they will obtain a label at that point, and that might change their behavior. I'm not saying I'm for or against this. I'm just throwing it out there. So that's what the radical non-intervention thing is. Blah, blah, blah. Formal labeling, informal labeling. I'm going to kind of skip through all this stuff because then we're getting really deep into the labeling theory. Kind of skipping through this to gender, race, and delinquency. Racial and gender inequities are consequential for law violation because they restrict the positions of minorities and females and therefore constrain communication networks and the power needed to influence others. Whew. Basically, trying to say that females, actually white men, have more power. Conflict theory, we've already kind of talked about this in the last chapter, but you'll remember I wanted a Maserati. I can't afford a Maserati through traditional means, so I'm going to become a criminal so I can get my Maserati. I also think about what's going on in the protests, which have turned to looting and some criminal behavior, violence, police stations being set on fire right now. These are the things that are going on right now. A lot of people would argue, people who are demonstrating, who are peacefully protesting, are saying things like, we've been peacefully protesting for 50 years and nothing has happened, nothing has changed. So is it reasonable for them to think that maybe turning to violence is a way to get heard? And again, I'm not encouraging that. I don't think that's the right way to go, but I can understand the way that people are getting to that concept. Anyways, we'll move on. this radical criminology basically, and kind of capitalism, basically saying that white men kind of run the country and hold everybody else back, thus causing other people to feel like they are being held down. And is this a case in certain instances? Yeah, it probably really is. So, but anyways, just go ahead and read those. Probably not going to ask a lot about that. Power control. Is it frustrating when someone else has more power than you? Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So conflict theory, we've already kind of talked about it. Restorative justice. This is the last part I really want to talk about here. Restorative justice and peacemaking. So there is a program in Fresno, actually, that is called Restorative Justice. And this is a program where a victim and offender get together and work out the criminal behavior without court involvement. So let's say a little old lady is living in a house, and her husband just passed away, and some kid walked by and spray painted his moniker, his nickname, on the fence that the husband painted just before he died. Okay? That kid gets caught by the police. So, because it was a low-level offense, nonviolent, he might be eligible for a restorative justice type program where the kid who did the spray painting and the victim, the little old lady, would get together with a mediator, so there'd be a person in between, to try and work out a resolution that makes everyone happy, that ultimately makes the victim whole. So in that kind of instance, the little old lady gets to tell the kid, my husband, whom, I was married to for 50 years, he passed away, 6 months ago, and he loved making sure his house looked good. And when you came and spray painted it, I was just devastated. I couldn't believe that someone would do that to me. And the kid who committed the offense has to tell the woman, I had no idea. I was just bored walking down the street, and I saw a good spot to write my name, and I did it, and I'm sorry. How can I make it better? And then the little old lady says, you paint my fence and write a letter of apology. And the kid says, okay, I'll paint your fence and write a letter of apology. And then they shake hands, and then he does what he's supposed to do, and the case is over, and it never gets referred to courts. Okay, so restorative justice. And they actually, sorry, I'm thinking while I'm sitting here, restorative justice is a program right now that's run through Fresno Pacific. So Fresno Pacific University has some of their master's degree students working on restorative justice and peacemaking. Where did this whole concept come from? The whole concept came from the Native American community, where you have your elders and sentencing circles. So the elders in the Native American community would typically sit down with the victim and the offender and try and work it out. And we have started using this, I think, in our the American criminal justice system for a lot of reasons. But this is where that's where it actually came from, Native American communities. Might be a quiz question on that. That's why I mentioned that. Oh, goodness. Social injustice. Whew, this is a heavy topic right now. According to many conflict-oriented criminologists, social injustice is found in apparent unfairness in the juvenile justice system arising from poor youth being disproportionately represented, female status offenders being subject to sexist treatment, and racial minorities being dealt with more harshly than whites. And there's no pause, there's nothing here. This is a problem. It is a problem. It has been a problem. Unfortunately, it will likely continue to be a problem. Disproportionate representation among minorities. Does that frustrate people? I think we all see that very clearly right now. And that is our chapter.